Что ты хочешь? Что ты хочешь? Ну, я побуду типа с людьми. То есть,
Это трансляцию начали?
да.
Зачем мне заходить?
Алло. 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 Алло.
Good afternoon, fellow sim drifting enjoyers. This is the test round of ISDCC YoungStars, the new league, which is comprised of cars that are not as powerful as the pro cars, but still, the drifting is going to be as enjoyable or even maybe more. We'll see, because, of course, this is the first season, the first round. We have no benchmark. We'll see how it goes. This league is brought to you by DUDAREV Motorsports, Zoom Racing, MAKAROV Design, Drift News. You can check them out in the descriptions. You can check out the products they provide or the services. We're very excited that this has come about because, as you know, there are lots of sim drifting leagues, but not as much with cars of that, caliber, that sort of class. The drivers here are gonna, try to get into the top 32, which is gonna be today as well, later on after the qualification. And the track for today's event is SOCHI AUTODROM, which is located in the south of Russia. It is quite a warm place. It has held Formula 1 events for a couple of years before it was dropped eventually in 2022. And, ever since it has hosted drift events with various configurations. There have been, RDS GP events, or as we call them, SOCHI Drift Challenge events. And this configuration is a SOCHI Drift Challenge configuration. It has been held only once so far. I don't think it is going to be held in the future, but it was an event in 2023 with lots of participants and very good racing, drifting, whatever you call it. There were many participants, just as there will be today. And we'll see how it goes. The track isn't particularly challenging, but there are a couple of details that make it lethal, especially the concrete blocks, the concrete wall, and when it comes to tandems, there will be maybe one or two issues. There will be maybe one or two issues with the transitions, because pretty much all of them are quite snippy. Now, this is the first run of today. We'll see how it goes. Of course, this is not... it hasn't gone well particularly, but we have to sort of see the replay to understand what has happened. But the cars, as well, as I said, they have quite a lot of grip and, not a lot of power. The concrete walls come at you quite fast. And I think this is going to be the deciding factor. How can you manage the zones where you have the walls close to you? And especially, as I said in times, but for now, it is quali, and still drivers have to sort of manage how they approach these walls and how they accelerate out of it. We see another participant coming up to the start line. It's beautiful livery. I really like the cars, especially when they sort of maintain these Japanese aesthetics. We see how he gets on. Is, of course, mainly we have drivers from Russia. they probably have seen the events that I mentioned previously that have been held here in real life, so they have an understanding how it goes even before they start. Alexei here, seeing the countdown on the semaphore. Starts off. And it is, as we can see, like, he tries to manage the throttle when he goes on the wall, big angle, full throttle up to the line. There was a judge's assignment that you have to carry on after the line, and he did exactly that. Otherwise, yeah. The thing about this as well is it is quite a high commitment track. So the first touch and go, the initiation, is a big angle entry, not backwards entry though. You have to know it is forbidden to do backwards here, but you can still go quite a bit of angle, and with these cars you can hold it for the first part of the track. It will make it interesting, of course, because when you're just going low angle and not with a lot of commitment, it is, not as much of a spectacle as, well, this is. We will see the decisions in a minute on your stream. You can probably hear the cars revving in the background.
Родион.
Okay, Alexei for his run got 77 points, which is not too bad. For a first run, probably if he can, sort of improve on these corrections that he had around the area of touch and goes 3/1/2/3, it can be better. But we have another beautiful Sylvia S15 going for his run. Grigori there, good angle. There's the crucial part. He's not using the handbrake to get up to the wall. Snappy transition, maybe a bit too shallow on touch and go 4/1. As a result, he has to shallow up on the angle. The judges decided that it is going to be a big part. How can you carry on the angle of the car through touch and goes 4/1 and 4/2? So if you can sort of hold the angle, the same angle through 4/1, 4/2, while also accelerating, it is going to be a good lead, well, a good qualification run, and as a result, a good lead when it comes to tandems. But if you shallow up on the angle, or the opposite, if you throw a gangster angle and then sort of have to rely on left foot braking and other things to still make it to the finish, it is going to be a deduction in points. Yeah, so as a result of the unfortunate corrections and so forth in the first run of Grigori, he got 37. It is, yeah, the only way, again, it is a competitive event, so you have to manage your tension, your nerves, and sort of get on with it. And no matter the results you get initially, like for the first run, as Grigori did here, he has to pull himself together and make it count on the second one. Yeah, the only way is up, as I said. And these sort of mistakes, they are not very, they're not crucial. They didn't like smash it into the wall, so the foundations are there. It's just a matter of cleaning up and becoming maybe more stable in terms of angle and stuff like that. Another competitor, also from Russia, in a BMW E46. Yuri here, standing again, waiting for. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, Grigori got 85. Interesting. Yeah, standing on the line, waiting for the green light, go out and start his qualification run, which is, well, going to be quite soon. In the meantime, yeah, I think also when it comes to this track, you have to understand that maybe some people have driven it on very high horsepower cars, and it is really not the same, because with these you can really push it in terms of inertia and fly into the corners. Again, commitment in like 1,000 horsepower VDC and so on. Yeah, cars, you have to rely on the handbrake quite a lot more. Anyway, the run is starting now. Very safe approach, I'm gonna say that. But yeah, he makes it to 3-2 with quite a lot of corrections and quite a shallow angle. Transitions, plays a lot with the throttle, we can hear it. He sort of blips it, then goes off, blips it and blips it countless times. I don't know particularly why would he do that, because it's not the patchy track. Probably a lot of people know that when you drive in the wet or in the winter, you have to sort of massage the throttle pedal, the clutch pedal, to get grip and not just spin the wheels endlessly. But here, when it's very dry and there are no patches, it is making the car grip up in these times when he lets off the throttle and the car grips up, straightens out, and he has to go on the throttle to spin the wheels more to get wheel speed to continue sliding. It is making, obviously, him to correct the car, which is very obvious when you watch it on a trackside camera. And the goal, obviously, is to sort of hide it somewhat. Because if you show that you are correcting quite a lot, it's going to be a deduction on style points. We have a system where the potential 100 points run is divided into 3 criteria, so line, angle, and style. And style is the one that counts the most. It has 60 points out of the 100 potential, of course. So even if you do line, angle, all of it pretty much flawlessly, but you sort of rely on that for braking quite a lot, you play it safe and all of that, you're not going to get a lot of points in the style criteria. And as a result, because it is a criteria with the most amount of points, you're not going to make it very far. So you have to push it and show the judges that you know how to do it. It is I think a lot of people have already sort of noticed that probably drifting is a lot like competitive ice skating in some regard, that it is about style, a lot about style. And if you can't show that style, well, you're not going to make it very far, because playing it safe isn't the way to go. We have Arseny at the line. I have been watching him in practice, and he has been very good. He was like throwing in gangster entries, big angle, very confident on the wall, and he can make it. I believe that. Big flick, big angle. The judges will look at the angle that he did there, but you can see it. He had to sort of pull back the car to make touch and go threes. Small dab of the handbrake there. Finishes the run. Maybe again he has sort of like nerves playing out, but because like I said, in practice he was like very, very stable, very consistent. It is a big part of it. No matter what you play, maybe you do like a CarX tournament with a gamepad and sort of all the assists that you need. Even still, you will be nervous probably, especially if you haven't done a lot of these competitions. Damir at the line, revving it to the moon in his another Silvia. But as we know, the S chassis is probably the most popular chassis in the world when it comes to drifting. No real surprises there. Good entry, but slowing it down, and as a result, exceeding track limits there. Slowing down before touch and go 3.3 and adding angle, which is another mistake. Judges will look at it. Oh, and then also adjusting the angle before touch and go 4.2. Like I already talked previously, it is a significant mistake. Talking about dropping tires and things like that. So dropping one tire is already a significant mistake. It is going to make you lose 5 points when it comes to line, the line criteria, and 2 wheels will lose you 10 points. So you have to be careful how you approach, especially in that first corner, because when you run up to the initiation, you can't necessarily see the whole sort of line through there. So you need to know what you're doing in terms of the line to still make it to touch and go 2, but not drop any tires on the outside. The line that obviously separates, that determines track limits, is the white line right after the clippings. The second touch and go. And you can see, he sort of let off the throttle and the car washed out with inertia. We have our next driver, Arseny Shmakov, and his BMW E92. Wall there is a wall there, be careful of that. But this is in my opinion the best part of this track, the touch and goes for the /1/2/3, because you transition it into a solid angle and then sort of immediately go on the throttle. It is very satisfying. For his run, Damir got 65 points, I think that's right. Which is, it's more than it's more than 0. There are quite a lot of competitors here, so you have to understand that in order to make it through, you have to you have to get at least one of your runs quite high. I haven't heard any sort of predictions on what the drop zone is going to be in terms of points, how many points you have to get into the top 32. But usually in these sorts of competitions, I think it is going to be close to sort of 80 points-ish. Probably something like that, because there are a lot of drivers here who have well, not a lot, but there are drivers here who have competed in the ISDCC Pro Championship. Some people who have competed in other like pro sim drifting competitions, be it DCGP, VDC, SVDS, whatever it might be. And obviously they have a lot of experience under their belts, and they know how to at least go through the qualification parts. That is sort of a given. And some of them are driving their own cars, which they made obviously using the physics data provided to them by the organizers. They are obviously restricted by the tire width, so you can't just drive a 1,000 horsepower RTR Mustang with the same tire that these guys are driving 500 horsepower cars. But we'll see how it gets on. We have another one on the agenda. It is Platon in his BMW E36. Correcting it into Touch and Go 3.2, which isn't particularly good, but he does make the line in Touch and Go's 4 quite flowy, sort of not correcting it, which is, as I talked previously, very important, because it is going to be a deduction on both the angle and the style criteria. So maybe that correction in the Touch and Go's by the names of 3, so 3.1, 3.2, that correction is gonna hurt him in terms of points, but the last sector was very good. Also, out of probably all these cars, I like the sound of the E36's limiter the most, because some of them, I'm gonna be honest, are quite hit or miss, but the E36 does sound quite good, in my opinion. I'm not really, big on BMW engines, so I don't know what it's called, M54, whatever. But yeah, it is quite a good one. Interesting. We are gonna have, as you probably know, all these like groups, qualification groups. So the first one goes through. In the meantime, the second group is practicing, and then the second group will start their runs, and third group will be practicing, and it all sort of goes this way to optimize the time spent on the whole event, because if we allow everyone to practice in one group to practice and then to run the qualification runs, it's going to be very, very long. I don't really want that, do we? Because we still have tandem battles later on. We have Zaharat line in his BMW E92. Yeah, probably, as you probably have seen, most of the cars, pretty much all the cars that have, you have seen during this event have been BMWs or S chassis, specifically the S15. There's a reason, of course, behind that, but it's not, nonetheless, it is quite interesting to see what people drive. And Zahar is off. Some problems with the initiation. Too much angle, yeah, that can happen. Well, it still carries on nonetheless. So if you screw up your run, you can still use it as practice, maybe if you didn't get enough practice beforehand, so... And the 360 against the wall at the end. Yeah, the thing about, like, you can make the initiation snappy, which is sort of what the drivers want, or what the judges want, but you don't want to make it so that you have to sort of catch the car in the process, because you have thrown way too much angle, and it has sort of ruined your line into the first corner. So it is maybe sort of a compromise between that and just being very safe. But we have the second runs of all the people that have been in Group 1. And we have Alexei in his... this guy. But yeah, we have obviously things to improve in terms of runs. Alexei has as well. And it will come down to obviously how much you know your car. People have had this track posted, I think, for about a week or so, so they have had quite a lot of practice. So it is run up, sort of good angle, but he transitions way too much on the inside, and as a result, misses out on 2 of the 3 touch and goes in the, in the third group. Still makes it to the finish, of course, but it hasn't been the best sort of demonstration on how to transition from touch and go 2 to touch and go 3-/1. But we'll see obviously what the judges think, because what I say here in the commentary may differ from the judges' opinion, because, well, they're there to make calls. But so far in Group 1, I think I'm right in saying the highest score is 85 by Grigory Tsarigorодtsov, who is driving the S15, of course. Yeah, he got 85 points, which is the top score so far, and the second best was managed by the guy who just had his run, which was 77 points. But yeah, obviously his second run wasn't as good as the first run, but still, if you're familiar with the rules, the best of the 2 counts. Anyway, the next competitor is our leader so far, Grigory. Very, very wide initiation, playing with the throttle to make it to touch and go 3.2, good angle, and dropping some wheels and straightening out as a result in touch and go 4.2. That is a bummer, but he still has his first run. It was a run with a score, it wasn't a 0. So the first run obviously will count for him as the better run, and the 85 points that he got there will be, sort of put in the qualification protocol. he wishes that he didn't go, that he made the 4.1, 4/1, sorry, touch and go a bit better than he actually did, because if he sort of, like we saw in his run, if you go wide there, drop some wheels, slow down too much, you can't really go further. Anyway, next run is gonna be Yuri in his BMW E46, slowing down maybe a bit too much. The judges will look at that. Slowing the car again in 3.2 to still make it, being quite shallow in 3.3, I have to say. Yeah, he is using, I think, just... I'm not an expert driver, but in my opinion, he's just using way too little throttle. And, well, because of that, as I talked about it in his first run, he has this problem that the car is straightening out at all the times that he's whipping off. And we could see it here. He's generally not driving with a lot of angle, which is sometimes a good thing, but in this case, when we talk about this track, in certain parts of it, you have to drive with big angle, because just that's what the judge's assignment is for. You have to look at it and sort of evaluate what you can do to make the track to still drive it all the way to the finish, but follow the judge's assignment and drive with big angle at certain parts where it's sort of required, where it gives you the most points. But Yuri there didn't quite do that, in my opinion. We'll see what the angle judge will give him. But yeah, it really didn't look like much angle. So in his second run, Yuri got 58 points. Anyway, we have our next competitor, which is Arseny again. Let's see if he can deal with probably with the stress that he had in the first run. Was a good second touch and go, and this is the sort of... No, I jinxed it. Yeah. I was just about to say that this is the sort of run that he has been doing repeatedly in the practice, but I sort of jinxed it and he over-rotated, which obviously puts him... Well, we'll see what the judges give him, but it is probably going to be a 0. Because he pretty much stalled in the touch and go 3-3/3, I believe it was, and then he transitioned into way too much angle, approaching touch and go 4/1. Anyway, our next driver is gonna be Gazeev Damir in another S15. Playing it probably more safe than Arseny in the previous run, but makes it count. It is a very good run through touch and goes 3/123. And then, a big correction there, approaching 4/2. But otherwise, a very solid run, especially in terms of line, because when you think of it, all the clipping points on this track are touch and goes. They're not outer zones, so it doesn't matter where you collect them. You can put one wheel into touch and go, it is going to be the maximum amount of points still for line. So it doesn't matter whether you put one wheel into touch and go or 2 wheels. The deduction, however, is going to be in the style criteria. Anyway, we have our next guy going, who's Arseny Shmakov in his BMW E92. Again, a safe approach, but drops very wide. Very low angle through touch and goes 3/1 and 2. Adds a lot of angle in 3 after 3 and 3, which is a big mistake. The judges talked about that in the briefing, and stalls the car in 4/2. This is very unfortunate, but still the judges decide whether something was straightening out, which of course gives the driver a 0, or it is sort of still within the rules and he could still do it. And Platon is the next driver approaching the second touch and go now. Very good through. Maybe a bit shallow on 3/2, but otherwise so far very good. Good transition, no slowing down for 4/1, interesting. And makes it home. It is, again, as I said, it is a good run in terms of line. In terms of line, it's very good. Maybe he could, get more angle in 4/1, but he sort of did a relatively normal transition, wasn't very snappy, wasn't anything crazy, but he didn't drop any wheels, he got the touch and goes. It was all within the rules. I see a question in the chat. Some good vibes there. Yeah, we're doing pretty good. Still sort of seeing how it all unfolds because this is a test round, you have to remember. So judging on the results of this test round, we will maybe tweak the cars further or maybe leave it as it is, maybe change some judging criteria, maybe not change anything at all. We'll probably use some feedback collected from drivers and you guys who are watching the stream right now. Maybe if we find it like very dreary, we will have to change something. But I think so far it has been entertaining. It's because I did watch some sim drifting competitions in the past. I watched VDM rounds 1 and 2 and VDC Drift Mansion. I think the stage was. I don't remember what what round was it in terms of numerical value, but I watched it. It was sort of interesting in the sense that I could see drivers at the top level, and it is always useful. I obviously drift as well, but in terms of the scenery itself, like the event, for me, it wasn't that interesting because pretty much everyone drives like flawlessly up until a certain point, of course, but it is not interesting for me in that regard because it's just too good in that regard. Yeah. Anyway, still have Arseni going for some runs, crashing into walls and stuff. And that is so far the end for Group 1. We'll obviously get in the drivers from the second group into the server and they'll do their 2 runs. So the best run is still the first run that Grigory Tsarigartsov did in his Sylvia S15. He got 85 points. And yeah, still none of the drivers could beat that, at least in the first group. Then it all sort of, there are quite close, like runs in terms of the score. So 77 for Alexei Olgin in his low rail, and then 73 and 72 for Arseny Kovarov and Damir Gazeev respectively. Roman Friedman is going for some runs in his S15, left foot braking there. I haven't seen much left foot braking so far in first group. Heavy. At least heavy left foot braking, yeah. But yeah, as I already said, the cars aren't like necessarily too very powerful. So if you have to brake a lot, you are just gonna crawl for the entirety of the course pretty much, and it's not gonna be particularly interesting.
У нас, если Родион.
So once the practice for second group is finished, we'll have obviously all of them stop there in the pits, and they're gonna go one by one for their qualification runs. We'll see whether someone in the second group can beat the 85 points that is the top score so far. We see some more S15s and E92s. And yeah, maybe someone will beat that. So some people probably have been practicing tandems a lot and not practicing solo runs too much, but still gives a good understanding of the track, what to do, and so far, and so on. These cars are loud. Anyway. So I've just looked at it, and we have in total 8 qualification groups that are gonna be they're not full, like not all of them are backed, but we are gonna have 60 competitors if all of them actually come to drive. Anyway, we have I think everyone's in. Probably. A 180 SX. That's always a treat to see. I really like the S13 chassis. It's just that little bit alternative to the vastly more popular S15s and so on. Even James Dean talked about this when he was building his Lucky Day Competitions 180 SX. That there is just something that little bit alternative to the S chassis that is brought to you by the S13, like 180 SX. It doesn't really matter what it is, the chassis is still pretty much the same. whether it's a 180, a 200, which is just a left-hand drive version, a 240 or whatever. You can put whatever body you want on it. Yeah, probably some people that have watched Initial D know about the SIL 80. That is, of course, an S13 just with, you know, an interesting body with the front not matching the back. Yeah, I apologize for the sort of quietness in the live stream, but there was sort of miscommunication when it comes to, you know, all the servers and stuff. Yeah, second group, and so far in terms of scores, already, of course, the highest score from Group 1 was beaten by none other than Igor Rashkov, who puts a 95 in his BMW E92. So, again, as I talked about it previously, pretty much the whole sort of grid is dominated by BMW 92s and S chassis, be it an S14 like we see on the line right now, or an S15 or something. So Nur from Kazakhstan, probably, I think that's right, is going through touch and go 3/3 and transitioning to 4/1 and 2, maintaining good angle. That is what you want to see. Yeah, so as I talked previously, the line thing is, I think when you come to a certain level, pretty much everyone can get the line right. It comes down to what sort of style do you drive. Some people in real driving as well, in real drifting, do a lot of left foot braking, whether it's necessary at the moment or not. They just sort of, it's a habit that they can't really shake off, so they instinctively put their left foot on the brake and just start doing braking everywhere, which obviously ruins the tandems. And some really drive with a lot of clutch slips or maybe handbrake pulls, because that's the sort of style that was eminent in the sort of grassroots driving. Started in Japan, of course, because Japan is the sort of motherland, the origin, the country of origin when it comes to drifting. And in these like low horsepower cars, which people drove back then in the day, as their sort of practice cars, their beaters, their missiles, as we call them now. You can't really left foot brake in these sort of cars because you'll just go very, very slowly. Anyway, we have Igor going for his second run. Let's see if he can improve on his already huge score. I really like his transition into 3.2, but he had to sort of catch the car in coming up to 3.3/3. But otherwise, very, very good line through touch and goes in the group 4, because again, this is maybe the most challenging part. Not necessarily this part, I mean the driving part, sort of going into a certain angle and then maintaining it, because a lot of drivers, they sort of shuffle they're always on the wheel and they're always making corrections to the angle of the car, which not miraculously sort of spoils it. I see 93 points for Ilnur, which is very, very solid, puts him in second place, I believe. But in the meantime, we have Igor going at it in his Nissan Silvia S15, playing with the throttle again to stay nice and wide in the area where you normally find concrete blocks and a concrete wall. On the limiter, all the way down to the finish. A very solid run. Probably the biggest deduction in his run is going to be right there in the beginning, maybe the initiation, because some of the people that have got really, really high scores, they were throwing sort of more gangster entries. Anyway, Ramil and Alteza/Lexus IS. Playing with the throttle as well to stay wide there. Yeah, very good job there. And adding a bit of angle when he was going through touch and go 4/2. Normally you see obviously people, because they brake before 4/1, they have to sort of shallow up on the angle as they're coming through 4/2, and then finally at the very end 4/3. So 4/2 maybe a bit of shallowing up, and then 4/3 quite a big shallow up on the angle. Yeah. But well, in terms of the Alteza, he still sort of managed to hold it pretty much the same angle through all the 3 touch and goes that were presented to him in the last sector of the track, which is ideal, pretty much, I would say. Again, I'm not a judge, I'm just saying what I see. But yeah, it is gonna be... So far, we have the leader, obviously Igor, in first place with 95 points. Then we have Ilnur in second place with 93 points. And then I think it is going to be the new MAKAROV with 87. I think that's right. So yeah, you can see how quickly things changed when it came to the second qualification group. The top 3 are all from this group and not from the first one. Anyway, next contender, it is going to be Montero. From Brazil. He's driving the E36, which is, again, as I said, probably the best sounding car of all the ones that are in the car pack. There was a bit of a moment coming up to 4/1 where he sort of was, it looked like he wasn't sure what sort of angle he was gonna drop in when it came to the last part of the track, because as I talked about it in the very beginning, the judges said that it is quite a snappy transition, the last transition into 4/1, but he sort of didn't really make it that snappy. He didn't make it snappy at all. The new MAKAROV. I like when drivers make their cars quite unique, like the flashing lights stuff or anything like that. When you have a bit of character to the car and it's not just, four wheels and a shell with something in it. It does require quite a lot of effort, and if you can't really, understand software like 3ds Max or Blender or whatever, it's going to be difficult. But of course, you can message our friends. ISDCC Works can give you any car you want, pretty much. Yeah. We have Ilnur going for another run here, and does some donuts for viewers. Sorry, I wasn't sort of looking at the chat. No, there isn't a second stream in Russian. It is entirely in English. Lazarenko. No, I don't think he was. No, he's yet to do his runs. So you see him later on. We have our third qualification group. I repeat, out of 8. Yeah, I think the 8th group is only half filled, so it is going to be 7 full groups. Well, if provided everyone actually comes, and then of course the 8th group only has 4 people out of 8. Yeah, in terms of leaders, again, the best of the best is still, I think it's still Igor. Yeah, Igor is still leading the quali, and we'll see whether anyone can actually beat a 95-point run, because after the first group, of course, 85 points was a good score, but it was manageable to sort of beat it. But 95 is a very different story. Это зашел вообще. But of course, as I already said, we will have some drivers from the pro category who will be driving. I think some of them are driving pro cars, some of them are driving sort of tuned down cars, not 1,000 horsepower. And they will obviously aim for that #1 spot when it comes to quali. I do remember that one of the participants, specifically Vadim Abramov, is driving, again, if he actually comes, but I think he was at the briefing, so he probably will compete. He will be driving, I think it's 1,100 horsepower Mustang. Anyway, we have Vladimir going in his Nissan 180SX, which is sort of weird that it's labeled 180 because it's left-hand drive, but anyway, slowing down there in 3/2. It has mismatched panels in terms of color. It does look a bit weird. It does remind me of, I think some people here know of the VW, I think it was a Golf, that they made sort of like a special thing, which had panels. All panels were different color, I believe, or some were different. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that it looked like something made or painted by a child, because it was sort of all flashy with red, yellow, and all these sort of colors. It looked quite interesting, but interesting, you obviously see many things like mismatched panels because people crash into stuff, whether it's into each other or into walls and all of that, and they have to replace it. And the most significant thing is whether the car actually drives and whether it can sort of survive the next competition or practice session. And it doesn't really matter what color the part that you replaced is. We have Andrei Shizov, who decided that he doesn't really want to drive sideways. Interesting. But I like the look of, you know, a lot of cars in drifting have flashy colors, but especially when it's something like purple or pink or something like that, it is a pleasure to see. Akhmetov Andrei with an Italian flag. Interesting. I think that's the default flag, to be honest, in Assetto Corsa, because of course it's Assetto Corsa, so of course Italian is the default thing. Yeah, Andrei finishing his run. Again, we have E92s, S15s, well, a couple of occasional outsiders like Alexis IS or an Altazza, it doesn't really matter. Or a 190, but mostly it is still gonna be E92s and S chassis. Most popular cars here. They are also, if you're a fan, if you've been watching Russian Drift series, the E92, I think it's the most popular chassis. Anyway, Yaroslav leaving the line for his run. Very good initiation. Again, massaging the throttle. A bit shallow. It comes up shallow in 3/2. But I think he still got it very close to the line there. It's a bit risky. Adding angle there before 4/3. I think, of course, the angle judge will look at that and decide whether that's a correction, whether that's a significant mistake and should be penalized, or they should just leave it as it is. And also, yeah, as I already said, corrections are deducted on both angle and style, which is not a surprise, I think, to anyone. Nikita Yapar from Kazakhstan, I think that's right, I don't see that well, is next at the line, like Borat used to say. Very nice. Yeah, the Laurel is not a very popular chassis, neither in real life driving, or in sim drifting, but you see it here, it looks very good. I really like these sort of executive saloons on the two drift cars. Very shallow in 3/2. That is a big mistake. He sort of, moves in a strange way. Sort of. Maybe it is some sort of a weird input, but the car sort of leans forwards a lot of times during the run. So he tries to stabilize it with any means provided to him, be it handbrake, clutch slip, or whatever it is. You can't do that, but if it's that visible on a trackside camera, it's probably, again, not going to be a big hit with the style judge. The main mistake, of course, is not that, but going very, very shallow in 3/2, and then, of course, he was also shallow in 4/1, which is very significant, because if you can't have good line, you can't have, anything. And probably a lot of people know that in real drifting there is a term, unchaseable run. I don't think that's unchaseable, to be honest, but a lot of runs can be unchaseable if you just, as a chaser, can't follow the leader. Anyway, Ivan in his E92, going through touch and go 2, big transition, but has to correct the car. Still drives very wide though, so the correction is going to be penalized, but not, I don't think the line is going to be. Good run, good commitment, but sort of maybe has to tune it down a step to make the line through along the concrete blocks more smooth than he did in his first run. It was again, in terms of line and angle, apart from the correction, of course, when it comes to angle, it was a good run, but yeah, if you aim for that 90 plus sort of gap in terms of the points, you sort of have to drive pretty much without corrections, because as I already said, style is the biggest part. It's penalized the most. It's going for a second run. So. Yeah, something like that, pretty much. He still had a bit of a correction, but it is a lot more subtle than the one he did before. This is the sort of run that, can get you into a very good position. It's very high points. But yeah, corrections are a thing, especially if you drive on wheel. If you have a wheel and you use it sort of with the settings that you can figure out for yourself and not some pro settings from a VDC driver, you are going to have to drive quite a lot to figure out how to avoid corrections, how to do smoother steering inputs and throttle inputs, all the rest. If you drive in control, of course, it is a different story. Like a lot of the drivers here are. Daniel Kozlov in his Nissan Laurel. Maybe you could use more angle, I think, borderline. Very shallow through 4/1. But yeah, the car, not talking about the run, but the car actually I think looks great because yeah, these big saloon cars turned drift cars are pretty much always a treat to see, but especially if you have like if you had splitters, wide body, a wing of some sort, maybe it's even a small one, it does make quite a big difference. Because, well, it is, especially I think for the people who don't really dig into drifting, they will find it quite strange. Anyway, we have Roman Friedman in his S15, very much going at his left middle pedal. He's using his brakes, I think, more than a lot of the drivers here. We're going full throttle, of course, up to the finish. But yeah, that first corner is gonna hurt him, hurt his points, because, you know, not really reaching that touch and go, the second one, and left foot braking that hard is going to be a huge deduction on style, because left foot braking in general usually is a deduction in style, but if you bury the pedal this hard into the floor, it is going to be an even harder penalization than it usually is. So we have Vlad Dimmer in his 180 or 200 or whatever it is. Shallow in touch and go 2, interesting, and touch and go 3/1 and missing pretty much, I think, 3/2, but slowing the car down for 4/1 and going for the last time up to the finish line. Interesting line through the third touch and goes, because he sort of transitioned into quite a big angle. It didn't really slow down in terms of brakes or stuff like that, but it did slow down a lot because of the angle, and as a result, he couldn't really carry on driving in that manner throughout the whole sort of 3/1, 3/2, 3/3 thing. Yeah, you can see it on on your stream that it is a big transition. I respect the effort, but sort of you have to tune it down a little bit, young man, to still make all the clipping points. And maybe after you do that, you can, of course, throw some gangster style entries, transitions, and stuff like that. Scoring wise, I think I'm right in saying the best one of the group so far is 78 points. Andre again demonstrating some interesting throttle application. I think maybe judging from the sound, he has very long gears, and so he's going on he's pressing the accelerator, and the car is sort of just mowing it. It's not reaching the high end, and with a lot of these cars, you have to be sort of closer to the top end to make good power, because all these cars, I think, are turbocharged, and so if you're somewhere near the lower end of the RPM, you are gonna have some interesting moments that are related to the turbo pressure and to, of course, the power that you're making, which is sort of what you want to make just enough, well, more than enough power probably, to be safe. In quali, because in quali we don't measure like they do in Russian Drift Series now. We don't measure how much time it takes for the driver to complete the course. So you can sort of rely on these old tricks from previous years where drivers would pump up the tire pressure to make the car maybe slower, yes, but also it's more controllable in the sense that you're going to go wider, you're going to have less issues going at, you know, these long walls and stuff. There aren't really any sort of places like that on this track, but still in these cars that are sort of 500 horsepower-ish, you have that area along the concrete blocks where it's not very easy to still collect all of the clipping points and maintain a decent angle. So maybe if you pump up the pressures and you have less grip, it is going to be easy. But of course, when it comes to tandems, you don't want to make the car slower any bit, because your opponent isn't gonna make his car slower because you made your car slow. He's gonna go as fast as he can, whether it is to catch you, which he obviously will do because you are a lot slower than him, or if he's the leader, you're gonna struggle quite a lot trying to make up for the gap that will have been created probably from the very start of the run. So anyway, I'm looking at the scores for the third qualification group, and still see the 78 points that were earned by Ivan Karmushin. Interesting, and obviously in the 92, that's a given. 76 points follows Daniel Kozlov later on for that amount of points. Anyway, Andrei in his S15, red. Red's my favorite color, so it is always a treat. See a red car on the circuit. Interesting transition to 4/1 on the limiter already. So in, you know, sort of on the contrary to that Altazza, Lexus, whatever, that we've seen previously, where I said that he probably has very long gears, so he doesn't really reach that higher RPM. On the contrary, this S15, I reckon, yeah, Andrei has shorter gears than I would have had, and so when he was driving in the area of 4/1, 4/2, he was already hitting the limiter. But probably with these cars, the ratios are quite far away from each other. So if you shift to next gear, whatever it might be, fourth, from third to fourth, you're gonna lose a lot of wheel speed. You're probably gonna straighten out. Next driver, Yaroslav, again an E92. Big correction there, coming from touch and go 1 to touch and go 2. The drivers extensively talked about this. The judges, sorry, I mess this up all the time. That you have to maintain the same angle from touch and go 1 to touch and go 2. Yes, it's quite a big angle. Yes, it might be difficult, but that's why you have to sort of effectively go through the gears and initiate, because if you don't accelerate enough, you aren't going to have enough momentum to reach that second touch and go. But of course, if you overcook it, you're going to just go 4 wheels off the circuit, and you don't want to do that. But Yaroslav sort of did the thing that probably a lot of drivers who played safe do. So he initiated into an angle which was a lot less than sort of was expected, and then he had to add more angle when it came to touch and go 2, because of course otherwise he would have just gone off the circuit, and that's really not something that you want to see. Anyway, we have the Laurel back at it again. Pretty much the same thing, adding angle there, but he's very quick, I have to say. I have to make sure I don't have it sped up, because the car, it does seem like a quick one. Stabilizing the car there in the last sector, which was a very good job. You don't want to see corrections there. Well, you don't want to see them anywhere, but especially in the last sector. Because whether you've seen real-life driving on this track, on this configuration or not, you probably sort of can deduce that the last sector is pretty much full throttle, accelerating out, and usually it is very close when it comes to tandems. So the chase driver is very close to the leader at that point. If you, as the lead driver, correct your angle constantly, you're gonna have problems. Maybe it will just be sort of rubbing each other, and that's no big deal. But also it could cause, the worst sort of contact in drifting, which is front wheel to front wheel. That can also happen because, well, if you change the angle, you're changing it, of course, relative to the driver who's behind you as well. And he has no way of telling what you're going to do. He's not Nostradamus. Anyway, another E92 on the circuit. It is Ivan Karmushin. A red E92. Again, quite rapid through touch and goes 3/1/2/3. Very snappy transition through 4/1, and I think he dropped a wheel there. I'm not quite sure, but he was quite quick, but it came with a price in the sense that he maybe overshot it a bit. Again, not necessarily sure. The line judge, of course, will look at it and see whether it was actually a wheel drop, or it was tire drop, or it was just a very close call. I'm not too certain on that. We have Daniil Kozlov standing at the start line, on the start line, in his Nissan Laurel, waiting for his turn, of course, to go out and improve on his on his first qualification run, which was a 76. I believe I'm right in saying. This car also has a pretty good limiter sound. Clutch kicking it there, you can hear it. Modulating the throttle in the last sector, but they still made it. I mean, the thing is about, I talk about these saloons quite a lot, but so hear me out. These cars, obviously, they're very long. Not in terms of wheelbase necessarily, although the wheelbase is, I think, significantly longer than, say, an S chassis. But the car itself is very long because it has a lot of overhang. It is a chunky boy, and you have to manage it because when you have these sort of tracks with walls and stuff, you have to be very precise with your driving because otherwise you're going to end up in the wall. If you're used to driving something like a GT86, which is famous for having, well, pretty much no overhang in the rear, so you can be on the wall constantly, you're going to have a tough time. Roman Friedman, S15. Left foot braking again, but not as much as he did previously. Modulating the throttle, again, left foot braking. I bet this guy drives quite a lot of higher horsepower cars like VDC and stuff. He's used to left foot braking, so he instinctively sort of does it here. In a much less powerful car, which reacts in a very different way to left foot braking. And of course, well, it's not as fast, so if you left foot brake, you lose even more speed and you can't really get it back right after that by just letting off the brake and leaving your foot planted on the accelerator. These cars don't accelerate as well, of course, as 1,000 horsepower cars, which is, I don't think, that much of a surprise. Still, they're quite quick. I think largely it is because of the tire and not because of necessarily the horsepower figures that they're making. Anyway, so we have finished with Group 3, and it is going to be Group 4, so pretty much halfway point through quali, which is always a good thing. Yeah, in terms of weather, I haven't talked about this, but weather is random. And right now it is 19 degrees air temperature and 29 degrees when it comes to the tarmac temperature. So it is not the same as, all these guys who only drive with ideal conditions, sort of 26 degrees air and 36 tarmac. When it comes to quali and results so far, provisional results, Igor Roshkov holds the top spot so far, followed by Grigory Tsirgorodsov and Alexei Olgin. And I think I'm right in saying that these are all three different cars. So Igor has a BMW E92, Grigory Tsirgorodsov has an S15, and Alexei Olgin has a L'Oreal. When we're talking about fourth qualification group, again we see Lexus IS, E90 to E46, S13, I think for the first time, if we're not counting the 180SX. And well, of course, NS15 and another E92, so it is a bit different from the previous quali groups, but still largely the grid stays the same. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just that it is sort of my opinion on this. I really like unusual chassis in drifting, unusual engines, all that sort of thing. I really like variety when it comes to what the grid is prized of. So when RTR announced that James is going to be driving for them, and he then announced next year that he's going to drive. Was it next year? No, I think it was. He started driving for RTR in 23 in America, and then Drift Masters. He only started in 25. So I was delighted to hear that because, of course, Drift Masters grid is quite diverse in terms of chassis and engines, but a Mustang is very different. Anyway, the Lexus IS200, driven by Azamat, a bit wide there, I think, in touch and go 2, correcting the car in 3/2, and then making its way. A very slow transition into touch and go 4/1, and then, finishing the run pretty nicely. I think the only sort of moments we have to look at are the initiation. Well, not necessarily the initiation itself, but what he did in touch and go 2. So how wide he went there, maybe, and also maybe the transition, because, well, I say it was quite slow, but maybe it really wasn't. I'm not sure on that front. Again, the first thing, going wide potentially, is a line deduction, which is quite bad because dropping a tire is a significant mistake. It's going to cost you 5 points in deduction. Anyway, next up we have Emil driving his BMW E92, going sort of in the middle of touch and go 2, and then collecting touch and goes 3 nicely. Good transition, touch and go 4/1. I'm not sure about track limits there on the outside of the touch and go. He went in quite hard, and then he was pretty much immediate on the throttle, but not sure whether that was within the track limits or not. No. Judges have all sorts of cameras set up for them to look at it from all the angles they need to determine whether something is within the boundaries or just outside it, which makes it a deduction, as you probably well know by now. Largely that can't be seen through the massive clouds of smoke generated by cars here. Of course, you can turn the smoke off, but sort of ruins the immersion, at least for me. I like these sort of like gimmicks that make it as much of an authentic experience as it can be. Whether it's, turning off pretty much the whole HUD or, having smoke, having all sorts of effects that are done by modders. So the S13 is go. Big counter movement into first turn. I really like to see that. I mean, the thing is, when you initiate, of course, when you do the flick, you still have to accelerate. That's, again, one thing that was covered by the judges in the driver's briefing, because if you do a flick and then and you do it pretty much off throttle, so you only do it with your wheel input, it is going to be a deduction, because it is affecting, mostly when it comes to tandem battles, it is affecting the chase driver, because he's just going to crash into you. Gangster angle by Dmitry into the first turn. Very solid. Maybe, yeah, correcting the car a bit, just as I said that. Good angle in 4/1, and then correcting the car quite a bit, crashing into the wall. I'm not sure whether the judges will consider this an uncontrollable finish or not, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. But he just sort of straightened out a bit too early, at least for my liking. I would say that you sort of need to still hold the angle at that part of the track. But what do I know? Maybe it is actually not that big of a deal, as I said. But yeah, looking at the run, pretty solid. Maybe a couple of corrections in 3/2, 3/3, and then that big one right before the end of the run. So the judges will look at that and sort of decide how it should be penalized, and, well, whether it should be in general. S13, nice. Again, big flick right along the wall and going very wide there. I don't think I've seen anyone go as wide as Gennady did here. On the limiter all the time. I think, young man, you can tweak your setup a bit, make the gears longer, because you're banging the limiter all the way, but he drives with big angle, pretty much with no sweating. I don't think there's much say here, other than obviously the elephant in the room, which is the incident in Touch and Go 2. It is going to be a deduction, of course. I think it was 2 wheels, which is -10. It's a big deduction. Again, respect the effort, but sort of the outcome wasn't that brilliant, if I'm honest. So, for the people in chat, if you're still watching, maybe you can type in who you are maybe rooting for, who you're cheering for, in terms of obviously the drivers. Maybe you know someone and you're hoping they're gonna win, be it the qualification runs or the tandems. So how are the scores looking so far? So we have our leader, of course, which has not changed since the second qualification group. With 95 points there, Igor's still chilling. But we have a good run by Azamat, who did an 83. A solid effort. Of course, Dmitry there in his E46 also did a 77. I'm not sure that like 77 is gonna be like enough to get into top 30, but at least that's what I thought before the event started. Now I sort of think that it might just be enough. We'll see whether it will be probably after sort of like 5th quali group and stuff like that, when more people will have driven the track and laid their runs and got their scores. Vadim standing at the line. Another Nissan Silvia S15. He's off and accelerating. Oh, it is shallow. Maybe he just made the car like too grippy, so he can't really make sort of like the first part of the track, which is pretty much you have to drive on the outer line. Because driving in the center of the track, it won't really give you a lot of points, especially because you're very close to danger, as there is a no-go zone. There are 2, in fact. Anyway, Grigori E92. Very close to the edge there. Big correction. Very big correction. And very low angle, in fact, which is turned into very big angle. This is a very... yeah. The thing is, like, when you're going along on your run, and you realize that you're gonna miss a clipping point or maybe an entire zone, if it is like an outer zone, you have sort of 2 options. You can ignore it and focus on what's about to come later on in the next sectors of the track, or you can still try to make it, like drag the car to the outer line if it's an outer zone or touch and go. But that does require some compromises, as left foot braking or dragging the handbrake, stuff like that. Maybe going very shallow in terms of angle, and that is going to be a big deduction, of course, in terms of style especially. And considering style has the biggest contributions in terms of points, it is a weird choice to make. But this is probably even worse, because he's gone wide and he's crashed into the wall. The thing about this transition, the first transition, is I talked about this in the driver's briefing, so you have to sort of make it without the handbrake. You can do clutch slipping or let off the throttle or something for a short amount of time, but if you use the handbrake, you're just gonna slow down way too much. Gangster entry by Azamat, unfortunately. Yeah, it was a bit too much. But again, A for effort, maybe not so much for the actual, for the actual run, in terms of getting the car into the zones and actually continuing to drift, because, well, in the end he did spin out and sort of gave us a burnout. Anyway, we have Emil at the line. Yet another BMW E92. Again, you can see these sort of initiations where the driver doesn't necessarily throw the car into angle immediately. He sort of makes it so that the car is in the process of initiating, if that makes sense. So he's rotating the car for maybe a whole second, and the car's gaining angle at that point, and only then he's sort of on the throttle. And that's really not the way to drive on this track, because you do have to make quite a snappy initiation to make make it so that you can be on the throttle at the line. There is a line that shows where you have to start accelerating, and if you are initiating into quite a low angle and you go on the throttle on that line, you are just going to go wide, probably. And even if you don't, it is going to be a big deduction on angle and style, because you're just playing it very safe. That's one option. Or second option, you are, well, I don't want to be rude, but you're just sort of like incapable of driving with very big commitment and aggression. Dmitry there, it started very well, but he did have to correct the car a lot when he approached the concrete blocks, because again, when you make the transition into from touch and go 2 to touch and go 3/1, and you go into a bit too much angle, you don't have many options again. You can just sort of ignore it and drive in that angle, but you're gonna miss all the clipping points that are that follow the 3/1. Or you can try to still make it, correcting the car a lot, and sort of going very shallow, maybe left foot braking, maybe dabbing the handbrake all the time. It is going to be, again, quite a significant deduction on points. But you can see the S13 on the line again. I really like seeing this car. It's not my favorite S chassis, but I think it's just, again, that little bit alternative and just not that popular that it doesn't sort of annoy you, because the S15s sometimes do. When you see like 30 of them, oh, hit the wall. I'm not sure how the judges are gonna, sort of look at it, but it was a crash. I'm just not sure whether they will sort of deem it as uncontrollable driving right after the finish. I think it was right after the finish. I'll have to look maybe again on the replay, because it was very close. Yeah, he just sort of goes. No, he crashed pretty much in the area of the touch and go 4/3. Yeah, so that's a bummer. Vadim pulling up to the line. That's what I've been saying about S chassis, S15s being just plentiful in these sort of tournaments and stuff. Modulating the throttle to make it is very shallow, but I almost stalled in 3/3, and maybe no, he still made it. When I looked at it as he transitioned into 4/1, it sort of looked like he was gonna go very, very shallow, and he didn't go shallow, but just nothing too insane or stuff like that. We have probably the last of the second runs going yet another E92 Grigori pulling up to the line and starting, in fact, his... I don't know where he's going. Maybe I just got it wrong. Sorry, it was a bit of lag on my side. Very safe transition there, in fact. It is, again, you have to understand that these cars don't have a lot of power, so if you do not rely on inertia and you rely on slowing the car down with handbrakes and just left foot brakes, you're not going to go out of the braking zone with as much, momentum as you would if you were in a VDC car or stuff like that. But maybe these drivers just don't have enough practice in these cars. Or maybe they did, and it's just, again, some nerves playing not in their favor, or some unfortunate mistakes that just, I hate to admit it, but they just sort of happen sometimes. Yeah, Grigori is going into the wall. Oh no, yeah, she held it. His car's very laggy, at least on my end. I'm not sure whether you see it on stream, but he's sort of like going like a car would go on an 8-bit console back in the day. I'm saying this like I witnessed it, but I really haven't. I'm not old in any way, shape, or form. We see the Forester here finally in this fifth, I think I'm right saying, fifth quali group. Very interesting chassis. Of course, it is. I've never seen one in real life driving, but maybe there are some Subaru enjoyers out there who do drifting in their Subarus, and it doesn't really matter whether it's a Forester or an Impreza. Just, of course, what matters is whether you've converted it to rear-wheel drive, because otherwise it's not eligible to compete in any sim drifting. Or, sorry, well, sim drifting as well, but drifting in general. So we've gone through pretty much 30 drivers, roughly. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. But still, I think I'm right in saying, yeah, the top score is still, well, 95, laid by Yegor Rashkov in the second quali group. So after the second group, we've gone through 2 groups, and still no one has beaten a 95-point run. A 95-point run laid by him, which is, couple of groups ago. Would you have some more E46s in this group? So like Mikhail Lunacharsky is driving here. It is, I think, more popular in sort of US. So, you know, Formula Drift, especially Formula Drift's, what's it called? Pro Spec, the lower series. Because, well, you can strap like an LS there and just make quite a lot of power. The chassis is very good, so it does allow you to be quite confident in what you're doing. The wheelbase is shorter than if you, like, a lot of people who are starting out drifting choose cars with longer wheelbase, like an E92 or, you know, a Toyota Mark II, all of that sort of thing, because it is easier to drive a long wheelbase car than it is to drive something with a short wheelbase, because a short wheelbase car is going to be a lot more snappy, always more snappy, and just generally harder to get into, because you're going to eventually, inevitably, as a person who's just starting out, you're going to make mistakes, and these mistakes are going to be a lot worse in a short wheelbase car. Gleb Bogatkin in an S13. But it is, as I already said, like there are a lot of different bodies for an S chassis, and this one is like an S13, or it's like an 180 SX front and S13 rear. If I'm brutally honest, it does sound quite bad, the car itself, because it has, you can hear it when he's going on pretty much max turbo pressure, and all you can hear is the turbo, pretty much. or at least from trackside camera, there's not much engine noise. It was a weird flick that he did, and as well the sort of his line through touch and go 1 and 2, he didn't have much angle, and as a result he was sort of going in a strange line he had a strange line there, because he had to make a correction after touch and go 2, because otherwise touch and go 3/1 would not be collected. Anyway, Denis in his grey E92 missing touch and go 2, that's interesting. Falling on the wider line to collect touch and goes 3/2 and 3/3, transitioning to 4/1 and holding the line nicely all the way to the finish. So, yeah, a couple of interesting moments there. The car gripped up when he transitioned to the concrete blocks, and as a result he had to sort of, again, push the car to the outer line, slowing down as a as a consequence of that. And yeah, adding angle as well a bit. But whatever, we have our next driver. It's already going at it. It's Alex Orlov in a Lexus IS. Again, playing with the throttle quite a lot, dabbing the brakes, modulating. The transition is... Oh, let's wait till the end of the run. Yeah, the transition up to touch and go 4/1 is going to be the biggest thing that the judges will look at, because, again, I'm going to say this time after time, it has to be quite snappy into a big angle. But he sort of was just playing it very safe. It was very slow transition, and that's not very great in terms of commitment, because commitment is what determines style in a lot of sense, and that is going to be probably a deduction. We have two Lexuses back to back, which is interesting. I think we haven't had that so far, at least. And I don't recall how many we've had over the qualification, like in total, but maybe the IS Lexus is the third popular car here after the E92 and the S15, but I'm not sure. Big flick, not as close to the wall though, and going off the circuit and missing 3/1, almost stalling, missing 3/3 and over rotating. That was interesting, but it was, I think, quite an obvious result, because sort of when you go that far over the line and well, you go off the circuit, and then you have to go to great lengths to still like sort of drop into the optimal line for touch and goes 3/1/2/3, you are going to go very slow, you're going to stall, and then bad things are going to happen. Anyway, Pavel in another E92, adding a lot of angle, and has to correct because of that in the area of 3/3. That is going to be heavily penalized because it's a huge correction, and crashing into the wall in the end of his run. Again, in the briefing we talked about how through 3/1 and 3/2 have to carry the same angle, pretty much. It's time for the Subaru. Huge initiation. Very, very stylish in terms of, not only in terms of the car, because I do think this is quite stylish, because it's unconventional, to say the least, but also in terms of his driving. It is very, it was very dedicated to be on the outer line at all times, and he made it. It was a very committed run, very wide everywhere where he needed to be wide. Again, very fast initiation, big angle. He had to make quite a lot of clutch kicks to actually sort of carry it through turn 1, but nonetheless, doesn't matter what you do, well, as long as it's within the boundaries. It doesn't matter what you do. What matters is the result, and the result was a very good run. Next up, on the start line we see Mikhail Lunacharsky, who is in fact starting his run just now. Big flick. Oh, it's a backwards entry. So it's going to be a 0, I think. And he missed the second touch and go badly. He's adding angle all the way through touch and go 3s. And I think he dropped a wheel, like coming from touch and go 3/3 to 4/1. So there's a lot to unpack there. Of course, the most significant bit is the initiation, because that was properly committed, but wasn't very good, if I'm honest. Yep, going at it again, very close to the wall, going very wide, but within the track limits, which is what you want to see. Going very wide again. Very nice line so far. On the limiter all the way to the finish line. So I don't even know what to say what was wrong with this, because one of the things again covered on the briefing extensively was that you have to initiate as close to the wall as you possibly can, because although there is a rumble strip between, which is sort of inside the touch and go, the first one, you can still initiate and be close to the wall, ignoring the rumble strip pretty much. It isn't going to do a lot of harm in terms of making the car unstable or something like that. If it were raining and we did an event on this track in those sort of conditions, it would be very dangerous to sort of go over any sort of rumble strip, because I think drivers who have tried wet drifting, or it's more about wet drifting, and just driving maybe circuit racing as well. If you go over rumble strips in the wet, you're gonna spin out pretty much all the time. You can, of course, make it if you're brave enough and you know what you're doing, but it does take a lot of practice to get used to catching the car in those sort of moments. But yeah, again, we're not driving in the wet, so there is literally no danger in going over rumble strips where it is needed, because of course the rumble strip on the outside of turn 1, where the second touch and go is, the rumble strip is outside track limits, so you can't go there. The track limits are determined by the white line, of course. At least on the outside of turn 1, you can see the second touch and go. Right after that, there's the first white line, then there's the rumble strip, and then there's the second white line. Of course, the first white line is already the track limit, so if you go over that, you lose points. Anyway, so Denise has his second run, big entry, going quite shallow, actually, because he's slowed down a bit. Shallow in the third 3/2 as well, and sort of, but transitioning nicely into 4/1 and then carrying speed he needs into 4/3. Good run. But again, there are things to take away from this, so you have to be maybe smoother when it comes to the 3/2 situation, because I've driven this track, of course, in the same cars, so E92, S14s, I've driven pretty much only these two, but anyway, if you transition into sort of quite big angle and you try to still make it all the way along the wall, you're probably not gonna get the touch and goes without left foot braking or some sort of modulation. But Alex is demonstrating that you can actually, well, of course you can, but the crucial thing is that he can do it, maintain the same angle and still get all the touch and goes that are within the second, I would call that second sector, I'm not quite sure, but I think it is sort of fair to say that. It is, of course, always easier to sort of determine that the track has sort of 3 sectors and go from there. And again, we have 2 Lexuses back to back. Goes from, remember that from the first runs that they did, but here are their second runs. It's interesting whether actually anyone can do better than 95, because still no one has. I think I'm right in saying. Yeah, so far in this group, Daniela did 84. But anyway, next up, Ilmar is going very wide in turn 1 and then sort of added way too much angle around the concrete wall, and it is making him miss a lot of the clipping points, which is very unfortunate because sort of he could obviously pull it back together and sort of still make it, but he didn't. Pavel is also going for his runs. E92, some corrections in touch and go 3/3, modulating the throttle up until the finish line. Yeah, talking about like Ilmar and his run, like he overshot, obviously. The first corner he went very wide, then he went to the second corner also quite fast, but he like sort of dumped a lot of speed with angle, and as a result he couldn't make. Danila for the second run, I think he dropped a wheel there, dropped the tire, sorry, and crashed into a wall. Remember I said when he did his first run that he had a lot of style? Well, maybe that was where he should have stopped, and he tried to make it even more stylish. And, well, didn't go that well, to be honest, because although he carried on after crashing into the wall, it still was a crash, so he had to correct the car, and that is always going to be a deduction. But well, he has 84 points in his first run, and well, the scores are still dropping in for the second one. We are back for the 6th group, so 6 out of 8. Let's see if some of the drivers in this group can beat the top score so far. Provisional, sort of, let's call it pole. Provisional top spots in the qualification protocol. Some of the drivers in here obviously are quite famous. For instance, Vadim Abramov is actually in this group. I talked about him in the very beginning of our stream. So he's gonna be driving his Mustang, as I already said. And, well, of course, it is gonna be a Mustang with, sort of, with pretty much the same physics, apart from the tires. The tires are gonna be not the same width as everyone else's. I think there are 245s in the rear, something like that. So he's obviously restricted in the sense that it is like the car's very fast on proper wide tires, and if you make them sort of smaller diameter as well as smaller width, you sort of like equal the chances for other participants to be on pace with him, because otherwise he's just gonna drive away from you and you're never gonna catch him. If you want something like that, if you want, like, I don't know, a Mustang RTR or something, like a car you fancy, you can of course find the ISDCC Works channel in the Telegram or in Discord, and sort of chat to the people who make these cars, sort of that you want that sort of thing, and they will make it for you. Anyway, we have Oleg Batalov going for his run, going quite shallow in touch and go 2, I have to say, but transitioning nicely into touch and goes 3/1/2/3. Big transition to 4/1, but maintaining his pace very nicely. He's going full throttle, like a lot of the time that he's driving. So again, talking about those style points, which do matter a lot, and that was very stylish, I have to say. Anyway, we have another BMW on the line, an E46, driven by Alexei, by the number of 223. We're still waiting for, the scores. The previous run, but yeah, after that, Alexei will show us whether he's a better E46 driver. As he's going right now. This is what I said about being close to the wall, but I think he was maybe on the line there, or maybe he dropped a tire there in touch and go too. But anyway, it is, again, big commitment. The initiation was probably one of the best from all the qualification runs that we've seen so far. Going all in, big angle, on the throttle pretty much immediately, and then driving it out nicely wide to touch and go 2. But as I said, maybe it did drop a wheel or something, or maybe he was just on the line. I'm not too sure about that. Maybe I'll look at it again. Yeah, I think it was maybe just over. Yeah, there is a bit of a weird moment in terms of the stream that the guys have pointed out in the chat. The sort of the table that shows how many points a driver gets shows 25 points pretty much immediately. Quite funny, but no, it's not any sort of like bonus or stuff like that. As we see Artyom pulling up to the line in yet another BMW E92. Yeah, quite a slow initiation, I have to say, in terms of, stabilizing the angle for quite some time. But collecting the position goes nicely and going right to the outer line to the finish. Doing some a couple of quick transitions after the finish. Just for the sake of it, why not? Again, sort of talking about the initiation, it is, of course, he didn't sort of go into backwards entry, or he didn't go very wide outside of turn one, but it was sort of could have been better in terms of style, of course, not in terms of line or angle or anything like that, but style, nothing more. Maybe second run will be different, and he will sort of go for it and try a different approach, gangster entry. When you have, a score on the board, in case of Artyom, I believe we don't have them as of right now. But we will eventually. And Peter is on the line in his BMW E92. That is a gangster entry, but he has to correct the car and as a result drops out wide. Ends up in the wall. Very unfortunate end of the run wall. He still uses it as practice and goes further to try to sort of, again, as I said, use it as practice. Because in the end he does have a second run, and maybe if he sort of understands how the car behaves in these conditions that are given on the server, it will sort of adjust and make it through without a zero, because crashing into a wall and not of carrying on after that is a guarantee of maybe a zero or maybe a very low amount of points if the judges are quite kind and they don't deem it as a 0 point run, I have to say. Alexander on the line, an E92 Beamer again. Waiting for the judge's decision on the Finnish driver's run, if he is actually from Finland. there's been a change in the order, and right now Alexei is going in his BMW E46, like taking the touch and go 2 in sort of middle line, which is allowed, of course, because it's touch and go. You can take it anyway. You're gonna have detections in terms of style, but not line. Yeah, very solid, very sort of very precise. He was aiming at the corners and not just going in with, you know, closing his eyes and hoping for the best. He sort of felt like a calculated run, which is a good thing, of course. Someone's revving the car in the background to oblivion. Interesting. Anyway. Well, the thing about, again, calculated runs, it sort of brings up that discussion. I don't know, I just have these sort of analogies all the time that you probably know that sort of argument that between Prost fans and Senna fans, that Prost was a very calculated driver. He was always sort of more into maths and making it as sort of predictable and precise as possible, and Senna was like a lot more about just we bail, we bowl. Alexander is going at his run, is going wide on the outside in turn 1, very close to the wall. Sort of, yeah, it wasn't the worst outcome, because the worst outcome is of course crashing into the wall and staying there, but he was of course scared of crashing into the wall and sort of stalled the car a lot and slowed down, and as a result he couldn't get to touch and go 3/3, and that is quite unfortunate. We could see him try. We've seen him trying, but it sort of didn't work out as well as he probably has planned it. We have Oleg on the line again. The BMW E36. I think it's probably the least popular BM here, because we've seen tons and tons of E92s, of course. Then some, you know, E46s and E36s. I think are the least sort of popular cars here, because they're maybe just people don't appreciate older chassis that much. I don't remember when the 46 came out, but it was something like 2001, maybe. Big flick into turn 1, going wide on the outside, too wide in fact, and but collecting touch and goes 3 very nicely on the limiter all the way to the finish. Maybe a bit shallow on the last touch and go, because again in the judges' assignment it said specifically that you have to be as close to the wall in the end as possible, and that didn't look like it was as close as possible. It was sort of like in the middle, maybe even closer to, like, further from the wall. And yeah, maybe that's like the only thing that's not too well about this run. Well, Also, he had a little moment outside of turn 1, on the outside of turn 1, where he sort of went wide. Anyway, Artyom, and is E92 showing us what is properly wide here, dropping 2 wheels on the outside, and doing a 360. Nice. That was a logical conclusion of that run, and Peter is going at it for the second time. Very calculated approach this time. Maybe shallow on the touch and go, on the second touch and go. Left foot braking there and dropping it high. I think that's like the most unusual maybe place to drop a tire in, because when you're transitioning from 3-3 to 4-1, you don't have to go that close to the inside of the track. And so Peter did, and as a result of that, when he transitioned, and an E92, remember, is a very long car, the wheelbase of an E92 I think is even longer than the wheelbase of a Toyota Mark II. So when he transitioned, the back wheels were, well, at least one of them, was actually sort of just crossing the line. So a bit of a miscalculation in terms of line that he was driving from the concrete wall to the next transition into 4/1. Definitely could have been better, but you have to look at the bright side. Obviously, it is just so much of an improvement over the first run that he did, because, well, the first run he crashed into a wall, and this run he just sort of went with it and got all the touch and goes. Maybe a couple of rough edges here and there, but otherwise, pretty solid. I'm gonna take a look at the scores again and see what's what. Of course, leading the way is still 95-point run. Late in the second group, and in this group, there wasn't much of an improvement, to be honest. All I see is like 79 points and stuff like that. Okay, and now we're back with the 7th qualification group, which is going to be second to last. If we're not counting the people who have delayed their runs until further. And well, Alexander here is going for a run. Another E92. Yes, of course, it is an E92, and well, he plays with the throttle very nicely. He just sort of manages to know what sort of grip does he want at any given moment, and then make it so that you know, he's reaching all the parts of the track that he needs to reach with throttle modulation and stuff like that, not with heavy left foot braking or hand braking every possible when every possible opportunity comes. So it is a very good run in that regard, at least. And yeah, well, in terms of flying, he got pretty much everything he needed. So no real upsets there. Vladimir revving up his Nissan Silvia off the line, initiating and going again through the center of touch and go 2, but that wasn't too bad because he went very shallow in 3/1. He's correcting his car all the way through 3/3 and then 4/1 before finally stabilizing it in the last stretch of the track. Yeah, that was, you know, well, I like to call this correction festival. So when you have a lot of corrections, especially just in one part of the track, it is, I think, only justifiable to call it something like that. But anyway, as we're going closer to the end, it is becoming more apparent who's gonna make it into the main event and who's just gonna unfortunately say goodbye, at least for now, for the test round. Of course, we are gonna publish the when time comes, of course, when everything is calculated, who's going up against who in the top 32. Meanwhile, we'll see Alexander Kuskov in his Lexus IS, which has an interesting sort of thing where the wheels go through the arches of the car. I think that was covered on the briefing. And that's sort of, okay, I think it was covered, it was decided that it's okay for now, as it's test round, and then it is going to be sort of explained in the rule book more, the people who write the rule book are going to go more in depth on this issue as well. And what is allowed, what's not allowed, and all that sort of thing. Because obviously, when you see that sort of thing, when the tire goes through the wheel arch, it means that the car is quite low. Anyway, we have a Mazda RX-7, I think the only one of a kind. Misses touch and go to bizarrely. Has quite a nice line through the 3s, but makes a correction in 3/3, and then pretty much at no point on the track was he full throttle. He was always sort of playing with it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just the weirdest part, of course, was the start of the run. So whatever happened there, he just missed touch and go 2 entirely. You don't see people missing that often because course, it does depend on how much speed you gain on the straight before the initiation, but also it depends on like how much do you slow down in the braking zone, and then subsequently how soon you are on the throttle, all that sort of thing, what angle you initiate into. But that was sort of weird because he initiated and then he just sort of missed the second touch and go, which is going to be, of course, heavy deduction. I can't tell you for sure how much does each touch and go cost in terms of points for line, but it is going to be, you know, noticeable in terms of the points that he gets in the end. I think he just sort of stalled. I haven't listened to the engine sounds at that particular moment, but I think he just sort of had a massive turbo lag moment, and that led to him sort of losing wheel speed, and as a result the car gripping up and just going forward and not going sideways. We have Andrei Gusev pulling up to the line in a Nissan S14. I think this is a Zenki, yeah, body kit. Quite funky. Very weird initiation. He, as a result, is going very wide. And again, correcting the car all the way through touch and go 3 and missing touch and go 3/3. Big transition. Not sure about track limits on that one. And then very, very, very shallow at the very end of the run. It was very weird because I haven't seen like an initiation like that. I think in all of quali. I'm gonna have to look at it again. I think he didn't use any sort of slow down method. Yeah, he didn't slow down at all for the initiation, which is very weird. Why would you do that? He probably wasn't in the briefing. That's why. This is why. All you sim drifters, it is important to come to the briefing and listen to what judges say, what is expected from you, what's allowed, what's not allowed, how to do what are you gonna get for whatever whatever run you do. Because if you have no understanding of the judge's assignment, you have no understanding of you know, the penalization system, whatever, you're not gonna get a lot of points, which is, I think, expected. Again, Alexander on the line in, do I have to say it? BMW E92. It is go. And yeah, he has a big flick very close to the wall there, but overcooked it and went very wide. I think it was 3 wheels off. And that is rather unfortunate because the flick looked like it was gonna be, you know, a big fat entry. Well, it was, but it was sort of just too fat, too big. It is tricky, like I said in the beginning. When you initiate, you don't necessarily see the track limits on the outside of turn 1, so you don't see, well, at least I don't see, because I'm driving the first person, not with a roof cam, so you can't really see the outside of turn 1 where it ends. And so if you come in very hot, of course there's no way you're gonna slow down like instantly and still make the turn. So you're going wide. That's just, nothing you can do about it. But it all comes down to how much practice you've had to sort of know instinctively how fast you have to be going on the run up to the initiation to then initiate, still make the turn, pick up all the clipping points and, well, not go very wide like that guy did. So, Kuskov Alexander in an IS, left foot braking in turn 1 already, I think. But going very close to concrete blocks, very brave. Modulating the throttle at all times. Accelerating out of 4/1, 4/2 and going very close. This is what I talked about. This sort of car positioning at the last turn, in the last sector, is what's sort of expected from the drivers. You have to be as close to the wall as possible. And before that, there is, of course, an outer side. Well, there's a line which tells you the track limit for, you know, that last sector. And if you can carry speed and angle, but also sort of go all the way to the outside and maintain that sort of positioning and go very wide through the whole turn, the last turn, you're gonna get quite a lot of points for style, which is what you want. Anyway, we have Igor in his rotary, which is of course an RX-7, going for a second run. Interesting to see whether he actually, you know, sort of learned from that first run, especially, you know, considering what happened, that he sort of just stalled and gripped up at the very beginning, in turn 1. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see whether he learned from that, and is he gonna be a man to beat? Left foot braking, but very big angle there. Going quite close to the wall, maybe just a tiny bit of correcting the car there. Very close to the outside line, which determines the track limits, of course, and close to the wall. This is so much better, of course, than the first run that he did, because, well, he maintained speed through turn 1. He did sort of left foot brake there for a little while, yes, but it was still, I think, within sort of reasonable boundaries. He wasn't like doing, you know, the standard Formula Drift style of driving where you just bury your left foot in the floor and modulate the throttle input. He sort of did what he had to do. I think it wasn't like extensively covered that you cannot left foot brake. You can. It just has to be done in such a way that you're not losing a lot of speed and you're not potentially making the chase driver avoid collision. Because a lot of left foot braking is, well, down to, you know, causing some of that, if done incorrectly, left foot braking, of course, can cause collisions. But yeah, judges sort of determining the score, and I think that's going to be it for Group 7. We're going to have Group 8 next up, and of course it is the last of the lot. I'm just looking here and I see sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 people who wanted to delay their runs until later, which is going to be a different group. It is going to be like after all the people in regular groups sort of did their runs. Of course, we can do that because well, people have their own, sort of situations where they have maybe something very urgent and they need to delay the competition. But anyway, last group. We have people like Nikolaev Kirill in here, who's one of the people sort of, who put all of this championship together. He's driving, say it, BMW E92, of course. S54, I think, engine. And, well, yeah. He's competing this time. Let's look quickly at top qualifiers so far. So Yegor Rashkov still maintains the top spot with Ilnur Simbaev in second place. They had 95 and 93 top qualification runs respectively, followed by Alexander Koskov, Daniil Makarov, Igor Kiba, oh jeez, Gustavo Basido Monteiro, and Emil Ikonnikov. As for Group 8, we have Andrei Popov going in his BMW E92, purple one. He's correcting the car after 3/3, which is again was covered that you shouldn't do that. But maybe it's just, paying because the car, all the movements, at least for me, they seem like he's just constantly adjusting the car, but maybe that's really not the case. You have to remember that it is, of course, a technical sport, and your connection matters, your sort of how good your internet is, how good your PC is, and how far away are you from the server host, because that, of course, determines the ping. We have Maxim Burlakov revving it from the start line in his BMW E36. Huge entry, left foot braking through turn 1, just a little bit, but correcting the car there in 3/2, sorry, which, could have been avoided, but wasn't that noticeable. And he made it, to the very edge of the track in the end. So, I think overall very good, especially, in these big commitment parts of the track, like the last sector with the wall there in the end, and the second sector with the touch and go 3/3, which is also a wall, the same wall in fact. In these moments he was very good. Well, the only couple of issues were corrections. So no brutal mistakes like missing touch and goes or going very wide or something like that. Which is, in fact, a sign of a very good driver. If you can, do away with the vast majority of sort of these huge mistakes, you're already very good. So Kirill Nikolaev is going at it. His E92, maybe not too much angle in touch and go 2, and then of course adjusting the angle in touch and go 3/2, which is not optimal, but a very, very snappy transition into 4/1, which is what you like to see, and going all the way to the wall. Very nice. So there's going to be Andrei Popov again, another E92. So scores are dropping in for previous run, and we're going to have, of course this is a small group, so it's not full. So we're going to have, these are already second runs, so yeah. It is going quite far. It is going quite fast because there are not a lot of drivers here. Kind of an obvious thing. But anyway. So Andrei Popov starts off big flick, very, sort of nice angle on the initiation. Again, I don't know whether these are corrections or that's just connectivity issues. But his car, does seem to have to move in relation to the track, so that's what you would call corrections. He's doing some... yeah. Generating tons of smoke after the finish line. And Maxim Burlakov is already revving it up on the start line, waiting for his turn to go. And let me look at the scores so far. So that's again, he went pretty much the same way, I think, in his first run, where he sort of got a bit shallow on touch and go 2. He was very good in like touch and go 1, but when it came to touch and go 2, it was just sort of could have been wider there. It was a wider line. Could be better through there. Well, it's not could be, it would be. So he did 79 in his first run, and I'm not sure that this was necessarily an improvement, but maybe it was. Let's see. So Kirill Nikolaev did an 86 in his first run and an 88 in his second run, which is very solid. As for the other drivers in this group, we see Andrei Popov, who did 77 in his first run and 76 in his second one. Who else? Well, that's about it, actually, to be honest. So, yeah, the highest scored driver in this group was Kirill Nikolaev. So, congratulations to him for that. So, yeah, the leaderboard was pretty much untouched, even with the 8th group going in. So 95 and 93 remain as the top scores for the region. I don't want to like congratulate anyone that early on, pretty much, but maybe it is a sealed deal already that Igor won the quali with his 95-point run. But also, of course, we can't forget about all the other people who have driven here and sort of made a big impression. Ignore, of course, who's in second with a 93. He wasn't, well, in my opinion, wasn't any sort of worse than Igor. He was just sort of a bit different in terms of style. That's what matters in the end. Of course, it is a sport which is called by people. Other notable, maybe, memories. I think it sort of the impression. I already have an impression of what the tandems are gonna be like, because I've seen all the runs here in practice and in quali, and it is mostly like you have a clear distinction between people who have driven, who have practiced before, and people who maybe haven't practiced at all or just practiced way too little. And it shows because when you don't have confidence in the car, you end up doing things like, holding the handbrake for way too long in turn one on the initiation or stuff like that. And it is going to Okay, we have our last qualification group, which is gonna be maybe not a bit unusual, but if you watch real life drifting, you know what it is. It's basically the drivers who didn't have an opportunity to participate earlier, be it because of technical issues, or maybe they just had something to do very crucial, very sudden sort of circumstances unfolded, and yeah, that's why they're driving here. The thing that's different about this group is, of course, they only get one attempt. So this group, it consists of some of the drivers, as I said, that couldn't make it in the regular groups, and as a result of that, of course, they get penalized with only having one run, and they have to make it count. Also, what's interesting about this group is we'll see two Toyota Mark IIs here. JZX 100s, beautiful cars. Again, I am quite a bit of a sucker for these huge Japanese saloon cars. They do float and boat. The only time I've driven a real drift car was a Toyota Mark II. It was a JZX 90, not a 100 though. But nevertheless, they do look insanely good. Especially, I really like the one driven by Vadim Grishin, because it's in striking blue, and it is it has these details like the bonnet clamps that go there instead of the normal bonnet locks and stuff like that. Very obviously common in real life drifting. Meanwhile, we have Mikhail on his first qualification run, driving the Nissan Silvia S15. Very wide initiation, off throttle for too long in my opinion. Anyway, but holding the angle nicely, very nicely in fact, along the concrete blocks, accelerating out of 4/1 and going quite close to the wall. Very nice overall. Maybe again a couple of points after the initiation. He was sort of hesitant to go full throttle. Maybe he should have been more decisive, because he sort of the angle of the car changed because of that. Otherwise, yeah, very, very solid. Very nice run. Maybe, yeah, contender for a top spot, at least in this qualification group. Next up, it's Luigi from Brazil in his Lexus IS200. Very nice first corner. Very close to the wall, nice, but maybe the car's wobbling around a little bit in that area. Modulating the throttle in the last turn and going again close to the wall in the very end. Nice run, nice run. I think, yeah, again, a couple of things that you can see straight away is how these, or at least these two drivers that have run so far, how they transition into the touch and go, the 3/1 touch and go. It is, sort of a big commitment transition, and you have to be immediate on the throttle, but not sort of, you don't necessarily go full throttle along the concrete blocks throughout the whole sort of turn, because then you will just Luigi's running up for second run. Does he know he doesn't get it? I'm not sure. Anyway, oh, he crashed into the wall anyway. So yeah, big commitment, but you have to you almost have to modulate the throttle there along in these touch and goes 3/1/2/3, because otherwise you're just gonna grip, the car's just gonna grip up, and you're gonna go on the inside, and you don't really want that, because obviously all the clipping points are on the outside, and you have to get the maximum amount. You still, even though these are touch and goes, you have to go on the the edge of the track. Anyway, Yevgeny Parshin is next to go. Gangster entry, but quite shallow and touch and go too, I would say. And big angle transition, and as a result having to adjust the angle in touch and go 3/2. Accelerating out to 4/1, maybe again correcting the car a bit in 4/2 because he sort of slowed down the car, lost quite a lot of momentum, and he had to adjust the angle to still make all the clipping points. Anyway, we'll see what the judges think of that run. Meanwhile, we have Ivan Izakiev on the line, another Lexus IS, waiting for his turn to go out and show everyone what he's capable of. It is mostly, I think this qualification group is, again, most interesting because the cars people drive here. Yeah, so a couple of Lexuses, a couple of Mark IIs, notably. And I really hope that, at least one of the Mark IIs, but preferably both, make it to the tandem so we can see them in the future, later on today. Because, again, beautiful cars to look at, very nice. In terms of driving, I haven't driven them, these exact Mark IIs, but I really like the VDC one and some other street ones. Anyway, Ivan initiating maybe a bit shallow on touch and go 1. Again, judges instructed the drivers that it is sort of, you have to go very wide there to get the maximum points as close to the wall as you can. So Ivan makes it count on the last time because it does go pretty much all the way to that wall, to the last wall. It's still lining up for a run. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. In terms of the run there, yeah, pretty good initiation, and the first turn are probably the biggest sort of mistake, if you can call it that, because if he went wider, he could have accelerated to higher speed to initiate, then wider to maybe a bigger angle and shed some speed and still make the first corner, still make touch and go 2 without dropping any tires on the outside. Yeah, see the Toyotas in the background. So judging from this, again, as I already said, in tandems, I think one of the most crucial parts of the track is going to be the transition to touch and go 4/1, because you can see different approaches that people have used throughout this quali to how they transition and how they sort of accelerate out of touch and go 4/1, because you can use a double handbrake to slow the car down and also sort of rotate it into the angle that you want to have at that particular moment. But also you can just use weight transfer and suspension loading as a way to make a snappy transition, but also then maybe stabilize the car with a bit of left foot braking or clutch slipping or whatever. And some drivers don't make snappy transitions there at all. They just sort of play it safe and slowly rotate the car around, and then start, their final acceleration up to the wall. So we see the second Toyota Mark II, sort of a 2-stage initiation there. Depth of a left foot brake, too much angle, I reckon, but no, he still makes it somehow. Very close to the edge of the track there on transition. The only maybe the thing to note for all the judges, the transition to touching the 3/1 touch and go, because he did go into quite a lot of angle, and then he sort of didn't pick up the pace a lot through that whole zone of touch and goes 3/1, 3/2, and 3/3. Otherwise, banger run, obviously doing everything he can to collect all the clipping points and still, do it in style. The initiation as well is maybe something to look at, because again, instructed, snappy. What we actually got was sort of like a two-step initiation, and that's about it, really. Otherwise, very good. Yeah, you can see sort of if you transition into big angle there and you have a lot of grip in the car, you have tuned it somehow in a way that it is gripping up the moment you maybe lose a bit of speed, a bit of wheel speed, then it is hard to make that turn two, if you will. Yeah, so that about concludes our qualification, I think. Igor Rashkov still held his number one spot for the entirety of this quali. Well, not entirety, because he was in the second group, not in the first one. So technically not the entirety of it. But anyway, he did for the most part of it. And same goes for Ilnur, who was, I believe I'm right in saying, in the second group as well. So they maintained their number one and number two spots with 95 and 93 points. And yeah, Kirill Nikolaev was third in his BMW E92. So out of the top three cars, we can see that two of them are E92s. Only one of them is, I believe, Eleanor drove a Nissan Silvia S14. Probably the only participant in that car in today's quali. We have some, let's say, international drivers as well in the top 10. So Gustavo made it up to 7 spots. So yeah, cheers to him. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's gone rather well. We've had a couple of very unfortunate moments, crashing into the wall, spinning out, straightening out, going very, very wide in turn 1 and stuff like that. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it's been very good. And it's also very interesting to see how these people who drive, of course they drive differently, because we're not just robots, and it's not, it's not racing, it's not like ticket racing, so interesting, people drive differently. It's interesting. It would be interesting to see how they get on in the tandems, which are going to happen later on today, as I already said. In the meantime, obviously, another thing to mention. Thank you to DUDAREV Motorsports, Zoom Racing, MAKAROV Design, Drift News, and all the people who have supported this project so far. You can check them out by clicking link in the description, and all the links will be in the Discord or in Telegram if that's what you want to use to get all the latest updates about our championship. Yeah, all the results have been taken into account, everything has been calculated, and the results will be posted again in our Telegram and on Discord. You can click links in the description to find out who's going up against who in the tandems and see where the driver you've been cheering for instance, has landed in terms of his spot in the tandems. Yeah, and yeah, thank you very much to everyone who's been watching the stream, and we'll see you a bit later on when the tandems come.